Welcome to the Mike Hewitt Show. My name is Mike Hewitt, and I got to tell you some exciting news. We've been on Sundays for the last couple years, and beginning this morning, this is where we're going to be. So we packed up the show, moved it from Sundays. We're here on Wednesdays. We're changing the format just a little dinky bit. In the past, we had been strictly political, and I say strictly 99% political, and now we're going to, of course, still maintain a political flavor, but we're going to lean a little bit more life and living and conversational, hopefully some call-ins. Take a pen if you got 231-830-3109 is the call-in number. Here shortly, we're going to have a guest. Her name is Kolleen. I'll tell you a little bit of advance. It'll give you kind of the flavor for her. Kolleen was a caller on our Sunday show when we reached back out to her. At the time, we were talking about saving the American family and the price of single parenthood. We were going over the statistics of suicide and the crime rates and incarceration of children that actually come from single parenting. And along that path, she called in to explain that not all single parents are single parents by choice, and that her husband had left her for a man, and her very, very unique way of dealing with that reality. Listen, joining us today, just as our often co-host, is Jim Riley that just sat down. Jim, welcome back.
Well, it's nice to be here on a Wednesday.
It feels kind of different, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Well, it's a great show, and of course you're in a new time slot, and folks are perhaps looking for a different show. You're going to be here for a long, long time on Wednesday, so I think that's a great positive move.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. We spent a little over 2 years in the Sunday slot, and you don't know what the future will hold, but I'm excited about Wednesdays, hump day and all of the things that go along with Wednesday. But it allows me to change up the flavor just a little bit. I love politics, as you are more than aware. You've sat in and listened to me rant for more than one Sunday.
Love those rants, baby.
Oh, man, but it's kind of nice to be able to include with that some real-life experience. My sister often had said to me, you political types are always talking in trillions or billions. Bring it down to how it actually affects our life. And I got to tell you, that was part of the inspiration for wanting to change up the show a little bit to do just what she's talking about. Like you always hear the debate going on over gay marriage as an example. So our guest today, rather than us talking about which political party wants what, this lady's going to talk about how it actually impacted her family, both positive and negative, I suspect. So that goes to what my sister said of, can you drill it down to how it affects real life? And I'm excited about that.
Well, I think it's a nice, a different view that you're not likely to get in the other media. So,
well, when this particular guest was a call in, it was kind of took me back a little bit because dealing with it was obviously had to have been traumatic, but her response to it, I'm looking forward to getting her in here to discuss that. But her response in general was very, very unique. I think it's going to make some folks' eyebrows raise a little bit.
Well, I think that when you take in this case, let's just take the one issue that is a bit of a hot button with the elections, and that is the ability of gays and lesbians to marry. It's not as simple as it may appear. On one hand, it seems to me to be kind of commonsensical that if two folks want to commit to themselves, they ought to be able to do so. And it's kind of mean, or now we're being told that it's bigoted, and you ought to be shunned from employment, from public life, from pretty much all sorts of society, if in fact you believe that marriage should be solely between a man and a woman. But there are repercussions that are far beyond the, let's give them the opportunity. And I'm not suggesting that it's right or wrong. But like everything else, even things like allowing medical marijuana, there are repercussions. It's not a simple issue, and when you take public policy and start figuring out how you're going to make it work, it makes sense to have it talked out and discussed beforehand rather than afterwards.
Waiting for the surprises?
Well, in many cases, they're not even surprises. We know that they're going to happen. The question is, how are they going to be addressed?
Now, you tend to be, would you describe yourself as libertarian-leaning?
I tend to be libertarian, absolutely.
So where are you at on gay marriage? You in favor of it or against it, or what's your? I understand you say it's complex, but where's Jim Riley on that topic?
The only negative to me, I'm not adverse to allowing gay couples who want to commit to marrying. I know that there are some laws, and there might even be some constitutional issues that require, for instance, if you allow gay marriage in California, but Utah has decided that they do not want gay marriage. That there are constitutional requirements that Utah must respect the California law. I'd like the ability of states to make their own decisions rather than have the federal government or the judicial the branch of the government make those decisions. It's pretty clear that the United States will move to allowing gay marriages, lesbian marriages at some time over the future. Our society has changed. One of the benefits to that will be, or at least it'll be a benefit for companies and government, will be that those couples who have not chosen to get married or not had the ability to get married but are now getting marriage benefits will have to either get married, make it official, or lose those benefits. Today, it sort of makes sense, I think, to a lot of folks that if you're married, you get benefits from a corporation or from the governmental body that you work for. But since gays are not allowed to marry, they don't get those benefits. Now they can just say, hey, we are a partnership and we want the benefits.
You know the fascinating thing about this entire debate, and it's kind of how I ended up in the debate with our guest coming on, is that when I look at it, to me, it's a little bit of a math issue. I agree with you in your stance that I guess let me say differently. I don't know if I agree or not. I don't care one way or another. I don't have a dog in that hunt, but when I do the math of it, 3%, according to the U.S. Census, identified themselves as gay or lesbian. And of that group, according to polling, only half of them have a desire to be married. So when I start looking at the math in total versus the social problems that I see in America as it purports to male and female heterosexual marriages. And listen, I'm not trying to address the sexual side of this. I'm looking at the children and I'm saying, holy moly, we've got a lot of kids that are being raised in single parent homes. And to me, traditional marriage is in trouble. And so rather than us spending all of our time politically in Lansing or in Washington debating whether half of 3% should be allowed to get married or not, it seems to me that we ought to be doing something to save the American family itself.
You know, I couldn't agree with you more. So much time and effort and talk has been wasted on this issue. Where it is legal, where gay marriage is truly legal, in many parts of Canada, Ontario, which is very much like the United States, gays tend not to get married. As you just said, the percentage of gays who, when they can, actually will make that legal lifetime commitment, they are very small in number, and sadly have believe it or not, a significantly higher divorce rate than in the rest of Canada. So we have many issues that are very, very important. Certainly, if you are a gay person, lesbian, this is an important issue to you or your family. But in terms of those who avail themselves of it when it is legal, it's very, very few people.
Listen, I got to tell you, I had an aunt. She's passed away now. When she lived with her significant other, whatever we want to refer to her as, they lived together for almost 33 years. When my aunt passed away, as often happens when you hear about couples, within 6 months her partner was gone. Now, having said all of that, my aunt's response while watching the debate go on TV and the parades in San Francisco, etc., she would look at me and she said, hey, if I wanted to get married, I'd find a man. Now, that was her view of it, and she was very, very open about her lesbianism. She didn't flaunt it. It wasn't a political issue to her. It was a personal choice that she made. In fact, if you knew her, you probably wouldn't know she was, because her sexual issues or her sexual desires were not, there wasn't a button that she wore on her lapel. She said, I just live my life. I work. I pay my tax. That's not how we live, referring to her and her partner.
Well, society has changed. The old stigma in many areas is gone. Certainly children and young people can be very, very cruel to those people who have outed themselves or maybe have not, and maybe perhaps act in a manner that makes people think that they are in the closet. We've got to enforce the laws that and maybe creative and new laws to keep people who have a different lifestyle, but a very legal lifestyle, and keep them protected. But there are issues, again, with creating special classes of crime, as we've seen with many other minority crimes, the hate crimes. That seems to divide us rather than bring us together.
You're talking about the protected class.
Well, the more protected classes you get, if you have a protected class, let's just say that you have a restaurant and a member of a protected class comes in and it feels that their service has been subpar. If you are a white male, you just don't come back. If you are a member of a protected class, you may very well find a lawyer willing to sue the restaurant chain under various federal laws, and you may get compensation for simply bad service.
We're getting to the point where, and we talked about this on this show before on Sundays, where we're probably the most offended and protected society that we've ever seen, and I'm not convinced we're better for it. It's my belief that until we all embrace equality equally, we won't have it. But when you talk about bullying, is kind of what I heard you were referring to with youth, high school being.
Yeah,
I got to tell you, I don't know that there's any legislative act that will cause the vast majority to not look differently at whatever. And I call 3% an extreme minority. I think that's a very small number, and no matter what we do, I mean, I know the media wants us to think that that's mainstream, but the numbers just don't suggest that that's a reality. And I'm not taking a position for or against it. I'm just talking about the math of it. I think that children are always going to be children, and they don't frankly care what legislative culture is trying to be created out of Lansing
well, again,
or D.C.
The vast majority of people who are bullied are not gay.
Right.
If you're too short, or if you're too tall, if you're too fat, if you're too thin, if you have red hair, you name it, young people will find ways to make another young person's life miserable. To the extent that we can, and I'm with you, I don't know if we necessarily need new laws, but we've got to be aware of it. We've got to try to stop it where we can. But when you get the special laws that say you cannot fire or hire someone based on their sexual predilection, well, think about it. If someone is married and decides that they want to get divorced, and at the same time, perhaps because of other things going on, their employer says they're going to get laid off, and then all of a sudden they come out and say, well, wait a minute, I'm gay. Then all of a sudden the lawyer has, the employer has a much more complicated issue. And as opposed to gender or race, gayness, lesbianism is self-described.
It is, but I got to tell you, having been an employer for most of my life, I'm a capitalist, and I don't really care what you do in the bedroom. If you can come to my place of employment and help me generate a revenue and make a successful business, the other choices, the color and all of those things, sex, those things to me are non-issues. They're literally a non-issue.
But if you offend or fire someone who is in a protected class, and if that protected class is now, let's say, a gay person, they may very well, certainly Ann Arbor just passed a law, many states have passed these laws, there may very well be federal laws. They can sue you under federal law, state law, city law, for discrimination, right. And you have to, it's essentially you're guilty until proven innocent.
So you could have been the absolute worst employee that's ever been hired by anybody, but then as an employer, I might be stuck with you just because of a handful of these protected classes.
Because you're afraid. Well, and you know what?
It is fear, by the way.
And you know what that ultimately does? That inclines employers from hiring to begin with folks who might be more likely to sue them down the road. So the net result is negative for literally everyone.
Yeah, which is why I say until we all equally embrace equality, we won't have it.
Well, it's a complicated issue, and I'm glad you're bringing it up.
Well, I got to tell you, the caller brought it up that we're going to have in the studio with us right after the break coming up. But it is a very, very complicated issue because even if you look at gay marriage in total, there is an actual economic impact on society with insurance and now with Obamacare, etc. These things because the laws affect married people versus single people differently. And in some states, it almost promotes single life with taxation because money does motivate. In others, that's not the case. So it goes way beyond a social issue.
Well, you'll see married couples who've been married for decades getting divorced later in life because of for financial reasons.
Oh, absolutely.
Or married. It goes both ways.
Goes both ways.
Much of it has to do with the ever-changing the monies that the federal governments and state governments and even cities dole out, which people intelligently respond to their benefit.
It's kind of fascinating because when we were doing a show talking about single parenthood, and we've all heard it's almost cliche now where a person will be on welfare and purposefully have more children with the idea of generating a greater income.
Revenue, baby.
From revenue. And you sit back and say, what kind of government would knowingly and wantingly sponsor socially compromising policy?
A government who wants reliable voters and employees hired on the government pay to take care of those reliable voters.
Okay, well, it makes sense. Listen, we're going to go to a break, but before we do, write down the number if you're going to, because you're going to probably want to call and ask our next guest some questions. Phone number here, 231-830-3109. Folks, we'll be right back.
This is News Talk 1090, WKBZ.
Renegade River in Spring Lake wants to buy your used handguns and hunting guns. Renegade River, your hunting, camping, and survival store. Stop in and check out their new and used firearms, sporting goods, Army and Navy supplies, and survival gear. Downtown Spring Lake, next to the police station.
Welcome back to the Mike Hewitt Show with myself, Mike Hewitt, and Jim Riley in co-hosting today. And today we've got a guest in the studio with us, Kolleen. Welcome to the Mike Hewitt Show.
Hi, Mike. How are you today?
Very good. Listen, folks, we kind of mentioned it in the lead up in our first segment about how we come in contact with Kolleen. But on our Sunday show, the way it was, she was a caller on an afternoon when I was discussing single parenthood. And the point of her phone call was that not all single parents are single parents by choice, but that they do a good job raising children. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm a single parent by no choice of my own.
Right. Okay. Tell me a little bit. How did it come to pass? What happened to you, Kolleen?
I married my best friend, and then after 15 years of marriage, he had decided to tell me he was gay. Somewhere in his mind, he thought I'd stay with him, but that was never an option. So we got a divorce. He left, and I have 4 kids to raise.
Okay. How old were your kids at the time?
2 to 15.
Okay. I guess I'm mildly curious. I wonder what mechanism, you're still friends with him, just so folks know.
I'm still friends with him, and the reason he came out was back then the internet was just starting and getting huge.
Okay.
And he started talking, I found out later, to gay people who had told him he needs to come out and tell me.
Okay.
And in the end,
was he having affairs behind your back, do you think?
He swears he never had an affair on me.
You mean he still swears?
He still swears to this day that he's never had an affair on me.
Okay.
And we were best friends married, so there was no reason not to stay friends. I always feel that when you get married, you love that person, and even if you divorced them, at one point you did love them enough to marry them.
Now you realize that that's a very unusual position. My first involvement in politics was I chaired a little group called Voices for the Children of Divorce. And it's one of the reasons that this show has a reoccurring theme about how to save the American family. It's my own personal political passion, if you will, to find some kind of, to be involved in at least trying to find some kind of mechanism or solution to saving the American family. That's what drives me. If people say, why are you so involved in politics? What are you trying to do? That's what I'm really trying to do. So when I looked at it back then, I would have a lot of people that would come to the various meetings, and a husband or a wife, either one, would stand up, and my ex-husband did, and then they'd list all of this thing, or conversely, my ex-wife would and they talk about them like they were the absolute worst, terriblest thing in the world. And I used to stop them. I'd say, first off, imagine what you're telegraphing to your children when you say half of you is this and then this big long list of swear words. That's just such a terrible foundational message to communicate to a child, in my view. And I would try to get them, I would try to coach them, if you will, to adopt the philosophy that you were saying, that we were friends. You slept with this person for 15 years, you had kids with them. How bad can the person really be? Let's stop it for a minute and think about it. On the other hand, sometimes you can be with a person for 15 years and really not know that person.
I would be that person.
Yeah, and I think that happens. I do. I think it happens a lot. Even though people will say, we share everything. I think almost all humanity has some things that they just can't share out of personal insecurity or whatever the rationale would be.
If I learned anything in life through all this is that you don't know anything more about someone than what they tell you.
Yeah, than what they want to share.
If they don't want to tell you, they're not going to.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, I think that when you had told me that the last time, that's a very profound thing, that when you're putting down your ex-spouse, you're putting down 50% of what that child is.
Oh, absolutely.
That I'm using that now because that is such a great process.
It's an unfortunate thing, but I got to tell you, I personally believe that part of what causes it and makes it worse in most cases is a couple, they're going to, sometimes divorce, by the way, is what's needed. Sometimes it's what's needed. If there's a lot of friction, and you have to ask yourself the age-old question, are our children better in a circumstance where the hostility is high versus trying to work out something amicable as two friends that shared parenthood? Unfortunately, what happens is that one or both of the parents go get a lawyer. And as soon as you get the lawyers involved, and listen, I'm not trying to paint with a wide brush. Not all lawyers are terrible, and all the cliches and jokes that go along with that. However, how lawyers make money is by litigating, by fighting, and having in our adversarial system. And so I don't know, I've never found another system that I like better than our courts. But at the same time, I'm haunted by the question of, when you have an adversarial circumstance that causes a divorce, is going to an adversarial structure like the court system healthy? And I don't know that that's the right mechanism. I just haven't found a good replacement for it.
I'm not sure it's just the courts, though. I think it's the friend.
Oh, yeah, you're right about that.
That had constantly, I know when my ex and I went through it, he had told me, we had made it a divorce agreement, and then he went home and saw his family, and they all said, oh, you can't do it the way you said. And I stuck to my guns of, you came into my office,
right,
and you said, this is what you want. And I'm not allowing anyone, my family, of course, was saying, oh, that's not a good deal. No, this was the agreement you and I came up with.
Right.
And I will not vary from it. Because friends have powerful influences of
if a couple could be honest, and I think you're exactly right with that, but if a couple could be honest and say, listen, I drink coffee and you don't, so let me keep the coffee machine, and I don't like toast, so you take the toaster. If a couple could sit down with a legal pad and leave out friend of the court, who I believe is enemy of the people. I am not a fan of friend of the court, only because I don't care if they're a friend of the court or not. I wish they'd be an advocate for the children. That's who I wish they would be, and I don't think that and I've been on both sides of the custodial issue, by the way. I've been a custodial parent. I've been the non-custodial parent. And in both cases, my interaction with friend of the court was way lesser than desirable and not in the interest of the kids. That's my personal belief. So when I look at it, it feels like none of the mechanisms, to your point, even friends and family, are necessarily able to step back and say what's best for the kids. Right?
Right. I didn't use friend of the court either. I truly believe that it's a moral issue, that when you chose to have these children, you brought them into this world, and that it's your obligation as a parent to take responsibility for them. And no court system should tell you that you need to be responsible for your child. Now, there are circumstances that they should. I was lucky enough that I could afford to raise my kids.
Right. Did you get support from your husband?
I did not.
Okay.
And again, it's a moral issue. Whether he chose to do it or not was up to him. I chose to have kids, and I chose that responsibility the day I got pregnant. So, no, he did not help. He helped occasionally with some things, But he was also having a rough life, and I knew that if I asked for child support for 4 children, he could never have a life.
Well, but there'll be an argument against that says if you're shackled with the sole responsibility, then you won't have a life. Folks, if you've got a question for our guest or us or a comment, don't forget 231-830-3109. But my point is exactly that it seems like it should be a shared burden.
It does.
And the Lansing, as an example, that legislates the laws that we have to work within, they'll say that some people purposefully shirk their responsibility and must be forced, and they're right. There are a certain number of people that no matter what you do, it's like trying to nail down Jello. They're not going to pay their responsibility.
I agree. And I was fortunate enough that I could afford to raise my kids. There were things that were tight, but I was lucky, and I knew that. And my children know what was done. So, they can either question their dad or not question their dad. He did the best he could do, and I don't think he can ask for more than that out of someone. And in between, he's had some mental issues.
Right.
And he's had to deal with that.
Do you think that's how do you think the mental issues in the gay lifestyle, they're related or not related, or did one cause the other, or?
I can't honestly be honest. I don't know.
Okay, that's fair.
I know that he had a breakdown after we got a divorce.
Right.
So I know that I kind of kept him together.
Okay.
Or I feel I did.
After the fact, after the divorce.
And after the divorce, he just had a total, and could not deal with he was gay. He
Right.
didn't want to give up his children. But he did get married, and now he's, fairly happy.
Now, you say he got married to another man?
Yes.
And in what state?
He moved to Washington, D.C.
Okay.
He's actually in the process of moving to Ohio because Ohio accepts gay marriage.
So now he's thinking, okay, I can get a little bit closer to my family. Mm-hmm. And his partner is fine with the move from D.C. to Ohio?
Yeah, Roger just loves him too.
So and you're on a pretty good relationship with your ex-husband's married man partner. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what caused me to say I want to get you back on the show again is, kind of the lead up is where we're brought, and I guess I want to go through the steps before I even get to that part. What was your reaction when he first told you I'm gay and stay with me, but I'm gay?
Wow. Well, he told me he wanted a divorce after an argument one day, so we went to Chicago to see if we could work it out. In our favorite restaurant, he said, I have something to tell you. And I said, are you having an affair on me? And he said, no. And I said, are you gay? And he said, yeah. And I said, no, you're not. I mean, we have 4 kids. You're not gay. He goes, no, I really am. And I remember.
So when you asked him, it was almost a rhetorical question.
Yeah, I didn't really expect it to, And then I looked at his eyes and I thought, he's not lying. And to be honest, for all people out there, you don't really know how to react. But my reaction was, what's the proper etiquette in this? Do I stay and eat the dinner? Do I get up and leave?
I don't know that there is that's not something that, what was the etiquette lady? What was her name?
I can't remember her name, but that's the way I felt that too.
People used to write she wrote a book, she wrote a book on etiquette. I can't remember it. That doesn't make any difference.
But that's who I felt like at that moment.
Yeah, but
what was the proper etiquette?
I don't know that there's a proper step for that process.
Probably not. I got up from the table and I fell down on the ground.
Oh, I bet.
And I'm sure I called him a few choice words. I remember him telling me to get up off the ground and me thinking, you can't ever tell me what to do. Because I'm an old-fashioned woman and I had believed, in the husband and the marriage and everything.
Right. You were in a restaurant, right? Mm-hmm. And you literally fell down on
fell right on the ground.
Yeah, probably fainted a little bit, didn't you?
I don't remember. I just remember him telling me to get up and stop crying. And I said, you can't tell me what to do ever again.
Right.
Got outside the restaurant, fell again. And by the next day, I just looked at him and said, look it. This isn't anything we can change. We need to figure out how to stay friends through all of this. The kids are the most important thing. And let's figure this out.
Listen, I wrestle with something. And you have to tell me, guide me a little bit, because the circumstance, it's so close. On one hand, I want to say, what a selfish act that was on his part.
I agree.
On the other hand, I think, well, how do you live a life for a whole life? And I really wrestle with those two rationales. If he's truly in a circumstance that is not where he thinks he. I honestly, Russ, and by the way, I'm pretty conservative.
I am too.
You know, anyone that's listened to my radio show knows Mikey is pretty doggone conservative. That said, you don't want to have someone living in a lie and be miserable. But then I think what he's caused to you and the pain to the children had to be, I can imagine myself falling down. I don't know how to get my head around the pain that he caused.
There is no way. It's unsurmountable. You know at that brief moment that everything that you had hoped and dreamed your whole life is gone.
Right.
I had always wanted to own a business with my husband. I grew up that way. That was my goal in life. And I do know I told him that. In one split second, you took away every hope and dream I ever had in life.
Right.
And you have to figure that out within yourself. What I decided, and I know this is silly, but people can take parts of your being, but you cannot allow them to take the core of who you were. And the main thing I focused on the first year of my divorce was that he would never destroy who I was. He could have destroyed parts of me, and he did. I mean, he changed a lot of things about me, but he couldn't take who I was away from me. I could only allow that to happen.
Do you think it would have hurt less if he would have said, I'm just not happy and I'm leaving, or yes, I'm having an affair? Was the gay issue, was that more painful, or just the description of the reality of the end of a marriage?
The gay issue is a complicated one because, one, you got to go, okay, I can't change what is. But there's another part of you that goes, gosh, he lied way back there in the church when he said, I do. This is a strange story, but we got married in a Lutheran church, and we're Catholic. So years later, we got married in a Catholic church. And they made us go in and talk to Father, and he asked us all these questions separately. And I came out of the room laughing, going, can you believe they asked me if we were gay?
Right.
I mean, we have 4 children. Of course we're not gay. Well,
he's thinking, uh-oh.
I don't know what he was thinking at the time, but that really has stuck with me.
It may be, in his defense, it may be something that he'd never grappled with himself.
No, he knew when he married me he was.
Oh, that's what he says?
Yes, he knew from about the age of 6, he said, that he was different.
So he was kind of pretending.
Oh, yeah, the whole thing was
in other words,
lie.
going through the steps of life to say, these are the things I think I'm supposed to do, but not where my heart is at.
Right.
That's what he would say?
Mm-hmm. And, his big thing is he thanks me in the sense that he could have ended up with AIDS. In the 80s, AIDS was coming out, so I probably saved him maybe from getting that.
Is he suggesting he'd have been very promiscuous?
Probably. But, there are so many, and I think this with any divorce. I don't think, part of what we grappled with through our divorce is what's a gay issue and what's a divorce issue. And I think that all people have that to deal with. You need to figure out what's important in your divorce. But the main thing is, please don't hurt your children. They didn't ask to be born. They are a product of 2 people that at one time loved each other enough to get married. And you just have to keep them in your forethought. Your front focus should be these kids, because you determine their life. As I told my kids, my life's determined at this point, but my goal is to help you determine yours.
Folks, we're gonna segue to a break, but listen, if you want to get some questions in, the phone number here, 231-830-3109, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to News Talk 1090, WKBZ.
Show in with Jim Riley and Kolleen, talking about divorce and all kind of really deep topics today. Listen, tell me a little bit.
And of course, it's just so to make it clear, Jim Riley is a co-host. Kolleen is the guest. When you say Jim Riley and Kolleen, it could be my wife or my ex-wife, Kolleen.
Didn't I call you a co-guest once?
Perhaps I could be a co-guest. And actually, that's really what I am. But I'm more an interrogator than a guest.
Your
today.
reputation is something else, Jim. Listen, tell me something. He tells you that you're on this trip to Chicago. He tells you, and you deal with it. We got a little bit of a feeling for that. I don't know that I could ever get my head around it personally, but how did your children, what ages were they, and how do they deal with it?
Well, I had 2 boys that were 14 and 15 at the time.
So they more than understood the concepts.
Well, actually, yeah, and of course at that point, boys are going through their own sexual identity too. So there were a lot of struggles there. There were struggles that their dad had found a partner really quick, and that they had to watch that. There were struggles amongst us because I admit I fell apart. I mean, the first year I can't even tell you if I remember most of it.
I think that would be expected, to be honest with you.
And then you would try to help your kids, but later on in life, when I talked to them, I found out they thought that I was doing it to have a weapon against their dad, but I never did it to do that. I wanted to know if they were okay when they watched their dad go into a bedroom with another man. You know, that to me had to be really the most difficult thing in the world to go through. And my kids were not around family, so we had no one. They only had me. I had a 2-year-old.
Did he sit and talk with them individually and say, I need you to understand, or that conversation seems like it would have been I can't say appropriate one because I don't know that this is an appropriate thing, but you know, when we were at break, Jim, you asked a question. Please jump in and
Well, Kolleen, earlier we were talking about the laws and the judicial decisions that have come out recently allowing for gays and lesbians to marry, and of course a recent one here that affected us in Michigan that says no, we cannot supersede it. So that it's in flux. But let me ask you this: you mentioned that your husband had told you at some point that he knew he was gay prior to you getting married, and if the laws were such that in most, if not all, states in the United States that marriage between a gay or lesbian was legal
back then,
do you think that might have saved everyone a lot of heartbreak? Might he have not even been looking in the direction of a woman?
So if you're saying the culture would have been more open to it,
exactly,
that he wouldn't have put all of everybody in.
Is that a potential? That seems to me like it would be a side benefit. There's positives and negatives, but this would be a side benefit that might have saved you and your family a huge amount of heartbreak.
That's true. I mean, he wanted the white picket fence. He wanted the children. He wanted to be married. You have to remember, back then, we got married in 1980. People weren't as open to the gays as they are today.
Oh, it's changed dramatically.
Yeah, I mean, today we're becoming more accustomed. The more we see it, the more accustomed we become to it. We realize that, although some don't agree with me, that it's not a choice. They're born it. And why shouldn't they have a life that they want? But here's the thing I tell people. Would I change it? No, because I have 4 great kids.
Yep.
Well, we're not talking about going into the Wayback Machine.
Yeah,
I mean, clearly you love your children and you wouldn't have them in their current form.
And I suspect he does also.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, listen, before I forget, because I'm terrible at remembering these things, I've got a sponsor that I want to make mention of, financial consulting, business consulting. If you've got a small business, especially if it's sports related, give Polano Consulting a phone call, 616-414-1137. That is 616-414-1137. So that must have been a wrestling. So tell me later on, let's segue. He got married. Mm-hmm. How do you I think a lot of ex-spouses feel bad or sad or like a permanent finality when their ex-spouse marries somebody else. In this circumstance, how did you deal with it?
Well, at the time when he was moving to D.C., we were not speaking. We go through fluxes where he doesn't want to speak to us or whatever.
When you say us, you mean you and the children?
Yep.
Okay.
And I had found out I had cancer, and so his boyfriend came over to give us stuff to say, hey, I'm moving to D.C. And I said, well, I don't know if Mike cares, but I have cancer and they're doing surgery on me and stuff. So Mike called and we ended up reconnecting and everything. And he said, look, we're moving to D.C. for us to get married. And I said, okay. And then he wanted the kids and I to come. And the kids said, Mom, I need you to go with us. Because everybody said, how are you going? And I said, well, my kids want me to go. And I'm not sure how I would deal with it if I was a child and my dad was marrying another man.
No, when you're saying going, you mean attending the wedding?
Yeah, attending the wedding. In the process of me attending the wedding, he asked me to cater the wedding. So I cooked all the food for the wedding, too.
You catered the wedding of your ex-husband.
Yeah, but it gets even worse. Or
Oh my
better,
God.
however you want to look
I
at
hope
it.
you jacked up the bill a little bit.
No, I did it for free. He rented us an apartment to stay in, so I didn't have to pay the cost of
All right.
that.
Well, there's
How big of him?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then, no, it gets better
Well,
because
how big
I
of you,
walked
actually?
him down the aisle to give him away to Roger.
oh, my,
Now, most people think that's really weird, but I felt it was kind of profound that I would.
Now, for the listeners, I want you all to understand, when I first heard this story, it was in a 60-second phone call. And I'm going, what did she just say? So
Well-
Still thinking that.
well, I think that says an awful lot. It says many things, but it says, Kolleen, an awful lot about who you are, and I think that's a wonderful, wonderful story.
I absolutely agree with you.
I hope
Absolutely
it does. I hope it shows my kids.
Not only that, it's the
Oh my
first
God,
time in
yeah.
almost 2 years of working with Jim Riley I've ever seen him speechless for a second. Did you notice that? He just
Well,
for just a minute.
that's-
what
I
did she
think-
just say?
I think that's a very beautiful and an emotional comment and experience that you had. And,
Absolutely.
And it is rare, which, of course, is as rare as me not being able to speak.
Now, being that I mentioned I have sponsors for the show, I don't know if this is an inopportune time or one of my other sponsors is Designed to Dine. So if you're thinking about getting married, I think they do gay weddings also, but if you're thinking about getting married, 231-259-0286, or you can find them on the web at design-2-dine.com. So you catered the wedding, you walked them down the aisle. What were the other guests? Were they kind of stunned by it, or?
Ironically, I had to also give the toast. Because
So you were kind
The
of like
hits keep coming.
you
I'm
were the
sorry.
best person. How do you toast?
I was not. My son was, but when he got up to give the toast, he just fell apart, and I've never seen my son fall apart.
Yep.
And at that moment, you're like scrambling, what do I do? So then I thought, I went over to Matt, made sure he was okay. And
Sure.
then I went up to the, I just decided I needed to toast him. So I talked
Toasted him.
about how lucky we were that Roger was part of our family now. And, you know, that if Mike picked someone, we were really glad that he picked Roger and that Roger accepted us because, as some people know in the gay community, they may not accept a family. That it's sometimes hard for that. And Roger's pretty much accepted all of us, and we've accepted him. I'm not telling anyone that this was easy. This was a very difficult thing to go through.
Almost
It's
insurmountable.
hard, but you just have to stay focused on what's important. Remember in a divorce, never to lose who you are. They'll take parts of you, but don't let them. And remember that the kids are first. No matter what, put the kids first. I didn't date for 3 years because I wanted to make sure my kids were okay.
I hope they understand what a great mother they have. Honest.
Me too.
That's truly an insurmountable burden that you carried forward. And this is not me making a statement of pro or against the gay thing, but what an overwhelming circumstance for him to put his family in.
Yeah, I feel sorry for him. If you want to know the truth,
How
I
does
feel
that-
sorry for him.
For how do you mean? For robbing himself of the family? Because kind of he did. You know, you
For-
talk about how everyone gets along, but the truth of it is that it changed things. It doesn't keep him in this show. I mean, if you go to my website at the MikeHewitt.com show, you'll see, the father knows best thing, where I'm a very 1950s traditional kind of guy. I am. In fact, the picture of me there has got a fedora hat on. So for me to get my head around these things is difficult, but forget all of the politics of it. What an incredible thing to do to the family.
Yeah, I feel sorry for him because he wasn't around to watch the kids grow up.
Right.
He doesn't really probably know his children as well as he should. I have got to enjoy every moment with the kids. And I tell people that when you're going through any of this or when you're divorced, even any parent,
Right.
just stop and listen to your kids. If you're getting ready for going out to dinner or going to church, just stop and listen to them. It is amazing to just listen to your children chit-chat with each other.
Right.
He missed all of that.
He did.
Let me ask you a question. You went through, obviously, something incredible, but you seem to be an incredible woman and mother. Where did you go to get support? Where did you get what were the good moves that you made that helped you through it?
It was really hard because I don't live around my family. I luckily I'm from 12 brothers and sisters, and so I had my sisters that were
Holy
really
smokes.
supportive that I could call anytime I got down. I do remember one time I asked Mike to take the kids for a weekend. I said, I'm falling apart. It was about a year after the divorce. I was falling apart. I knew I was falling apart. And I said, can you just take the kids for a couple days so that I can go in a room and fall apart and just cry or whatever?
Sure.
He told me no. He didn't want to take them. He wasn't going to take them. And I thought, okay, now what do I do?
Yeah.
And you know what you do? You pull up your bootstraps and you just go, okay, that's what life threw at me.
Got to tell you, you're right. He really robbed a lot from himself. And the gay issue aside, I see that there's, like I mentioned when I chaired Voices for the Children of Divorce, I saw a lot of parents. And fortunately, we're talking about small numbers, percentages. So when I say a lot, I want to hesitate a little bit. The percentages are small, but there's a fair number of parents that rob themselves of the privilege. Now what I get to see in my little world is I've got grandkids, and so I get the papa and the big hugs, and when I stand back and say, why am I doing this? That's why I'm doing it. So I'm wondering if he didn't really rob his mother of necessity from himself. That thing that I think all humans have is some things that are necessary that you do, and when you put up a wall and block them, it makes it tough to have a normal life.
And I'm not sure if it's all a gay issue for him as much as
Right.
it is he's also has some mental issues with this.
With dealing with it.
Yeah, and yeah.
Do you think he was stable before?
I thought he was, but then he tells me things now, and I go, wow, I didn't know. Where was I in this marriage?
Well, no, I think you have to understand, too, is that things are so different today. And if you're under, let's say, 20 or maybe 30, you don't have a sense of what it was like to be gay in the 70s and 80s. It would be, no matter how stable you were, it was a terribly, terribly challenging time for someone to feel those feelings.
Yes,
Right.
I agree.
No question about it. But the kids, are they stabilized now? They're older and life has gone on for them, or how are
You know,
they?
I can see issues that are within each one of them on all of it, the divorce and the gay. But you know what? They're fine because as I tell them, you have me and you have me in you. And so whenever you get down in the dumps, think of how Mom would handle it and pull up those bootstraps and get moving again.
My dad used to say, we've all got a bag to drag, or we've all got a cross to bear. And I think that's very true. Folks, listen, you can find us at themikehewittshow.com. Give Polano Consulting a call. Give Design to Dine a call. Jim Riley, thanks for sitting in with me again.
Great to be here. Thanks.
And listen, thank you very much for all you do, Colleen. You are my hero.
Oh, thank you.
I
And thanks,
appreciate
Jim,
you.
for
Mine
sitting in
too.
with us.
Folks, we'll talk to you next Wednesday at 9 a.m.
Gonna go to the place that's the best. When I lay me down to die, going up to the spirit in the sky. Going up to the spirit in the sky. That's where I'm gonna go when I die. When I die and you lay me to rest, I'm gonna go to the place that's the best.
Renegade River in Spring Lake wants to buy your used handguns and hunting guns. Renegade River, your hunting, camping, and survival store. Stop in and check out their new and used firearms, sporting goods, Army and Navy supplies, and survival gear. Downtown Spring Lake, next to the police station.